I'm an academic, I admit to that. And as you well know, probably, academics can do this all the time. And so being given a short TED-like talk is a challenge for me. So I decided to start with a conclusion. The conclusion is pretty simple in this talk, and that is to have a purpose in your life. Now, you can go home. That's it. If you decide to stay a little longer, I'm going to talk a little bit about what academics do as well, which is ask the question, why? So we're going to be talking a little bit about why having a purpose in life is an important thing for your life. And I'm going to start with this boiling frog metaphor. I don't know, most of you have probably heard of the boiling frog metaphor. If I take a live frog and I have a pot of boiling water and I pop the frog into the boiling water, the frog jumps right back out, right? We know that. But if I take a frog and I put it in cool water and I just gradually increase the heat ever so slowly, the frog gets sleepy and the frog boils to death. This is such an awesome metaphor for public health problems that we have. In public health, we face issues like sedentary behavior, boiling frog problem, obesity, boiling frog problem, our atmosphere burning up, boiling frog problem. All of these things happen so gradually, and before we notice it, we boil. So this is a huge issue for me. I started thinking about this boiling frog problem and started asking myself, what do you do about it? So in public health, here's what we typically do about it. We talk about death. If you don't quit smoking, you are going to die. Die, 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 die. There are holes in this argument as far as I'm concerned. I don't see this as being the best way to motivate a person, and certainly it really doesn't motivate people that well. Fear of disease, fear of death are not deep intrinsic motivations for most of us. So I'm just going to ask you, if you had this frog and he's boiling to death, what would you do? Now, if you were in public health, traditionally you'd go, frog, this water is boiling, get out now, or you will die. We're not kidding. We just wrote this new Surgeon General's report, Boiling Frogs report. No, really, you've got to jump out or you will croak. Not even croak, you'll just die. He would say, what do you know? Are you an expert on boiling water? He'd question the source. Go, this water isn't so hot. He'd deny. He'd go, now go away, I'm getting sleepy. Why? That's what academics ask. That's what I ask. Why does this frog not jump out of the boiling water? Why don't people change their behavior when they know it's killing them? Why don't they consider the message and change? That's what I wanted to figure out. Well, simply put, we're defensive. It's almost like we have this castle wall around our heads. By the way, in psychology, we call this castle wall the ego. And inside, we call that our self, our true self. David Foster Wallace once called this our little tiny skull-shaped kingdoms. It's apt. By the way, we're all defensive. None of us are immune to being defensive. It's important, in fact, to some extent to be defensive. But you know what? Everybody is really more and more defensive, it seems like, lately, and we're always bombarded with messages, and we never listen to them anymore, it seems like. And we are all boiling frogs to a certain extent. So I wanted to start thinking about what we could do to change that. And I see three ways. There's one pretty straightforward way, and that is simply to open the drawbridge of our castle wall. Every once in a while, now I'm going to bet that just about every single person in this room really likes one of these people and really doesn't like one of the other people. And I'm going to suggest to you, in order to open your castle wall, that you may pick the person you don't like and watch them on television for just half an hour a week. Under heavily armed guard, bring them into your castle. You can frog march them out if you want, no problem, okay? But make sure, just every once in a while, you understand what kind of experiences they had that led to the opinions that they had, and you might understand why that group is so angry, or why this group is so angry. I think increasingly our castle wall has gotten thicker and thicker. We wake up in the morning and everything agrees with us, right? With new media, we can just tailor our whole experience so everything agrees with us. There's a second way that I think we can change this castle wall issue, and that's to break the castle wall. It can get broken open. I worked in the cancer center here at the University of Michigan for 15 years, and I saw hundreds of cancer survivors. Every one of them got broken open when they found out they had cancer. Ram Dass was a psychologist at Harvard University, and he turned spiritual guru to millions of people. In his early 60s, he lives in Hawaii now, but in his early 60s, he suffered a severe stroke. What did he say after he got a severe stroke? He said, "My ego is broken open. Now I can see clearly." That's what I find among these cancer patients. When they get cancer, suddenly it's an opportunity for them to change their lives. And I've never, ever met a cancer survivor that didn't change their life in some way. It's an opportunity, in a way. How do you get broken open? Life events cause you to get broken open. A divorce, losing your job, getting really sick, losing a loved one. Steve Jobs knew that he was going to die of pancreatic cancer when he gave the 2005 commencement address at Stanford. Here's what he said. He said, "Death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent." Isn't that amazing? He expected to die by the time he was 30, and you know what he did? He invented Apple by the time he was 30, because he assumed he wasn't going to be around afterwards. So for him, death created a finite set of resources, i.e., number of years, and as a result, he lived his life huge. I had my own breaking open experience 4 years ago when my daughter Julia passed away. She was 19 years old. She had caught, when she was a baby, a chickenpox virus. We all get chickenpox, right? With her, when she was 6 months old, this chickenpox virus attacked her heart, and it dilated her heart and destroyed her heart, and her only chance of living was a new heart, a heart transplant. Back then, there weren't many heart transplants that were done among children. But she became one of the early kids to get a heart transplant, and we really didn't know what her future was going to be. But one thing we did know is that we were going to give her the biggest life that we possibly could, knowing that she had a finite number of years. She turned into a beautiful woman. She had a couple of amazing boyfriends, great friends. Yes, she was beautiful. She had great friends. She traveled around the world a couple of times. And then 4 years ago, we were on spring break. She was a nursing student here at the University of Michigan, a freshman, and we went down to the Caribbean, and she and her boyfriend had a suite right on the beach. Maybe not all of you would make that decision, but you know what? If you say, "I don't know how long I'm going to live. I don't know how long she's going to live," you get a suite on the beach. And that night, she turned to her boyfriend and she said, "I'm so happy that I could die now." And that night, she unexpectedly died in her sleep of a heart attack. I became broken open, and I tried to figure out what I was going to do in my own life. I had a couple of options, and I thought maybe about simply retiring. And I decided, no, I've got to do something else. And I was up in northern Michigan when I was trying to figure this out a few months after she had died. And I took a kayak out about a mile out into Lake Michigan, uncharacteristically calm. And I was out there watching the sunrise, and I felt inside me Julia very, very deeply. And I felt her saying something like, "Get over it." And I thought, get over it, get over it, get over it. You know, you tell a person derisively, "Get over it." And I thought, no, that's not what that means. What it means is getting over it. It means getting over the rubble of your broken castle, getting over and starting to see more clearly, see reality. Yourself is still cowered up as a little fetal position person. How do you get over that castle wall? You need to develop a new meaning, a new direction, a new purpose in your life, a purpose that's actually bigger than yourself. And that's what this talk is about. This woman, who is a boiling frog herself, turns out if she is reading the warning label on a cigarette pack, if we ask her to start reciting some of the values that are core, near and dear to her, and related to her bigger purpose in life, Things like, I want to be a good mother, I want to be a good spouse, I want to be in control of my life. It turns out that she is far more likely to change her behavior than if she just writes down something like the current events of the week. This is amazing, by the way. Just that simply talking to yourself about who you are, about your purpose in life, about your core values, can actually change your behavior. That's pretty amazing to me. By the way, that's called self-affirmation. And there are dozens of studies now that have come out looking at how reciting your core values actually helps you rise above your castle wall, transcend, and start thinking about things bigger than yourself, and you start becoming more receptive to behavior change. Your castle wall drops, you become less defensive. We wanted to study this a little bit more, and I like to study people's brains. So we can open this person up and put her into an MRI scanner, a magnetic resonance imaging scanner. We can take a look at her brain. This is very preliminary data. This just came out with my colleague Emily Falk, who was here until recently. She's now at the University of Pennsylvania, and she and her team, and me and my team, collaborated to start studying the neural mechanisms of self-affirmation. So the first thing we did was take a look at what part of the brain related to the self, the frog, in other words. Where is the self located in the brain? And by the way, we're not the first people to study this and define that the self is related right here, just above your eyes, in your forehead, in what's called the medial prefrontal cortex, or the MPFC. That part we've localized, and what we then did is start giving people messages that they should work out more physical activity. And sure enough, more activity in the MPFC related, sure enough, to actual behavior change, more walking behavior, more physical activity. That was great, but you know what? It mainly worked when we started asking people in the scanner to start reciting their core values. This is neat to me because what we're starting to think about now and starting to do research on, we have to first of all localize, where is this self? Where is the boiling frog? And then we have to figure out what other parts of the brain are related to rising above that castle wall. And we're just beginning this research, but it's very exciting to us. If you look at other data, you find that having a purpose in life relates to a lower risk of relapsing if you're a cocaine abuser, relates to lower risk of getting depression or suicidal behavior. It relates to a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. Yes, it does, 7 years later. It relates to a lower risk of heart attack and lower risk of stroke. After all this, I realized, you know what? I need to write a book about this. This is too important. So, as you might guess, I wrote it as a graphic novel. And I asked my graphic novelist, my illustrator, to draw me more handsome and thinner than I really am. And he said, "It's your book, man. Fine." So he did. And I wrote about a journey. I decided to write about my own journey, but also the philosophy and the science of purpose. So in a journey, you want to have a sage, right? So I decided a great sage like Yoda or a great sage like Jiminy Cricket was necessary in my journey in my graphic novel. So I was in the British Museum in England, in London, and I started looking at these cartouches, these ancient Egyptian cartouches, and I found this scarab god pushing a sun above a castle wall. Now, this was so awesome. I couldn't believe there was something like that. And it turns out that all the scarabs in the British Museum were pushing some sun up. I thought, what is this about? It turns out that this Egyptian god, the scarab god, is named Khepri. And Khepri is associated with rebirth, transformation, and transcendence. Awesome. So I started thinking, okay, where'd this Khepri god come from? Turns out he came from this, the dung beetle. Now just imagine this for a second. You've got these ancient Egyptians and they're going, wow, look at this dung beetle pushing this big ball of shit, you know? That's incredible. Let's make him our number one god. Kind of weird, right? Well, you know what? Sure enough, the family name of the dung beetle is called Scarabidae. It is for the scarab god. This particular scarab is named Sisyphus. You know who Sisyphus is, right? In the myth of Sisyphus, the very last two sentences, where the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. In other words, he had a purpose, whether it was meaningful or not. Now let's study the dung beetle just for a second. This dung beetle, awesome creature. What they do is roll this beautiful ball, then they do a headstand. The male dung beetle does a headstand on top of the ball. This is all true. toots out a pheromone that then excites all the women in the local area, and they go, nice ball. True. They look at the sphericity of the ball. They also go, wow, you look kind of horny. You know what that means? The dung beetle has a big horn because they have to protect themselves against all these dung beetle robbers. They also have to roll the ball. They roll it in a totally straight line. How do they pick the direction of this? They actually roll in accordance with the stars. This is the only insect known to man that actually rolls or does anything navigationally according to the stars. This is pretty amazing to me. I thought, this is great. The other issue is that many of us have shit happen to us, right? Or we're born into this. Dung beetles take that and they turn it into a purpose. I got my sage. His name is Winston. Winston the dung beetle. And he kind of manages the philosophy. He manages the science of my book and my program, my movement. He also helped me with a HuffPo blog. Arianna Huffington had read a draft of my book, and she was excited, and she said, Vic, would you do a blog for the Huffington Post? I said, yeah, but could I have a partner join me? She said, yeah, sure. What's his name or her name? Winston. Great. It's a dung beetle. Really, a dung beetle? It took a little convincing, but now Winston and I are partners as we build this HuffPo blog, a regular blog. So rather than talking about disease and death all the time as a motivator for our lives, why are we so worried about that? Mark Twain once said, I'm not afraid of death. I'm really afraid of not living. So why don't we focus more on life on this side? And then we try to motivate people's behaviors, their lifestyles, according to their purpose in life and according to how a lifestyle could give you more energy to work toward your purpose to change your life. Isn't that much better? When it comes to real health, what does real health mean? Does it just mean the absence of death? I don't think so. I think real health means an alignment between how you live your life every day and your purpose in your life. So I'd like to introduce this talk now, the end of the talk, by talking about you and your purpose. I have a new movement called dungbeetle.org. And this movement has a whole bunch of pieces to it, and I don't have time to talk about it, but I thought I would talk to you at least about the app that's a free app online on dungbeetle.org. And what you do is put in, first of all, we ask about your core values, just like we did in the scanner, just like other people have been doing to help you transcend that castle wall. Once you've thought about your core values, then you start thinking about which of these core values is most deeply held to you, and you literally get to pull those values down. That becomes your root system. And once you've done that, then we start asking you about your purpose in your life. And once that's done, that sets everything for you then. You can always change those if you want, but that sets everything for you. And then once you've done that, every morning, you're asked, how did you live your life in accordance to your purpose in life? How well did you sleep? How present or mindful were you? How physically active were you? How creative were you? And then how well did you eat? I ate like crap. But somebody sent me this comic recently, said, you need to find a purpose in your life. Well, I've tried, but it's not coming up on my phone at all. Well, now it has. You have no excuse. Use it on your phone, no problem. I am a boiling frog still, but I do have this very strong purpose in my life, and my purpose has been inspired by my daughter. And together what we do is walk on this path that helps me fulfill my life and helps me, quite honestly, keep alive. I'd like all of you to think about your own purposes right now. My own purpose in my life is to help other people develop a purpose in life and to develop a less nihilistic world. It's also to teach my students, every one of my students, as if they were my own daughter. And that takes some energy when you have a lot of students wanting to see you, wanting to interact, wanting recommendations, wanting advice, whatever that is, I try to do it. I try to look into that person and say, what would I want my daughter to receive from that teacher? And that takes a lot of energy. So what I've started doing is walking to work every day. Over the last couple of years, I've started walking to work, and I also meditate. I've I used to meditate a lot, and I went back, and now I meditate every single day. I have this simple rule. I don't allow myself to drink alcohol until I've meditated. And since January 1st, when I issued this rule, I have been almost perfect in meditation. I did slip once. I meditated and then forgot to drink. I'd like to close by talking about your own purpose, though. Here are some purposes from the over 1,000 people who have now put in their purpose and started using this app. "500 years ago, the Japanese poet Basho wrote a beautiful haiku called the Frog Haiku. Frog Haiku says, "Into the ancient pond, a frog jumps, water sound. We are all frogs. We can all jump, and we can all make a sound and change the world."